You're listening to The Bold Blueprint with Claire Bartlett. This is the go-to podcast for business owners who are ready to be bold, step into your power and claim the success that you deserve. So whether you're an established business or just starting out, this podcast is your weekly dose of unapologetic inspiration, empowerment and actionable advice to take your business to the next level. So whether it's the highs, the lows, or everything in between, I'm here to help you build a business that reflects who you truly are. Today's episode is brought to you by Xero Accounting Software, a champion of small businesses and a proud sponsor of the Bold Blueprint podcast. Managing your business finances can feel overwhelming, but Xero simplifies it all and gives you the power to keep your books in order and your mind on growth. Xero have amazingly offered a 50% discount off your first 3 months with them. So if you'd like to take advantage of this amazing deal, just follow the link in the show note. But for now, let's jump into this week's episode. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of The Bold Blueprint. Today, I am joined by Naomi Holbrook, who is the unconventional weight loss coach. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, well, hang on, Claire, this is a business podcast. What on earth is Naomi doing here? And I promise you, it will all make sense. So, Naomi, thank you so much for joining us this week.
Thank you for having me. Thanks for asking me on.
I'm really excited to have this conversation because, again, I think it's an area that, we don't necessarily think about as entrepreneurs, and actually we're always the bottom of the pile. So, first of all, can you just introduce yourself, tell us about your journey and how you became to be the unconventional weight loss coach?
Yeah, absolutely. So I really help to dispel the myths and to break the, toxic diet culture that so many women have inherited, but also help them to feel free inside their bodies without the guilt, restriction, and all the kind of labels that they've probably put on themselves. And how that transpired was I struggled with my weight. And actually, if I look back, I didn't struggle with my weight at a young age. I struggled with my body image, with my perception of myself from a young age. Saw my mum, when I was kind of in my teens, my mum who was in her 40s, watched her diet, watched her struggle with her body image. And of course, unconsciously had already started to process those feelings and patterns. I also went to a really competitive all-girls school, which I think didn't help from the point of view of, always comparison of sort of peers. But I started my first diets at 14, and that carried on until I was 39, and my weight fluctuated and dropped, and I dieted and I restricted and I overate and I did all those things. And at 39, my health was in the worst possible place, diagnosed pre-diabetic, chronic pain. I'd suffered with depression for the best part of 30 years. I lost my mum when I was a teenager, and that had a massive impact. And also I now realized that food became that friend, that comfort, all those different things throughout life. So 39, I decided to take control of my own health, lost, sort of nearly 70 pounds, and not through dieting, but this time through sustainable lifestyle sort of choices and changes. And then that took me on the path to leaving my corporate career and then starting up, retraining and starting up my own business. And the unconventional weight loss coach actually only came about last year. I'd already been coaching since 2016. But the reason it came about was because my messaging just didn't sit with what I was saying. I just felt, I'm not a weight loss coach. And all the women that were working with me were like, it's so much more than weight. But that's how the unconventional weight loss coach came about.
I love that. And I think it's really important, like you said, that actually our preconceived ideas start from such a young age, but carry through our entire lives. And so often it's so subconscious, we don't even realize that we have those messages in our head. But so we were talking just before I pressed record about how the body image and our health, and it isn't about the weight, it really actually isn't. It's about your health and your energy levels and those sides of things, and how important that is as an entrepreneur to look after ourselves. And because if, there's a really cheesy saying that I actually hate, but it does sort of, you can't pour from an empty cup. You need to fill your cup first. And service other people from the overflow of that cup. And it's a really cheesy saying, but it actually just says how it should be. We need to look after ourselves first. And with what you teach, it's not dieting, is it? It's not about dieting, because I am sure that so many of the listeners will have done the Weight Watchers and the Slimming Worlds and all of these things. I did it many years ago, and yes, it worked. I lost the weight, but it didn't fix my health, for one, and it didn't fix my mental issues in that space. And I talk a lot about confidence, and in business, especially if you're trying to build a brand, personal brand, you have to have that confidence. And a lot of that is body image and how we see ourselves in the world. So working with you and just actually starting to prioritize yourself can really help with that, can't it?
Oh, massively. And there's not one woman that has come to me and not had guilt attached to looking after themselves. And again, you say about so much of it is preconditioned. And I talk about my mum a lot. And, sometimes I feel a bit like maybe I shouldn't do. But again, she worked so hard, and she was a nurse. So I guess her personality and everything was all about giving to others. And I saw her literally burn herself out. And it's why at 52, she died from a chronic illness. And so it is conditioned and programmed into a lot of us from an early age that we are the caregivers, that we're the ones that look after, if you look at like the kind of games we played at school and all those sorts of things, we were the ones looking after other people.
Yeah.
So it becomes this real battle with wanting to look after ourselves, because I don't think there's anybody that wants to neglect themselves, but we want to look after ourselves, but we feel such guilt towards it, and we feel like it's selfish and we should be giving to everybody else first. And you say about kind of cheesy sayings, but actually my first business coach, this has just stuck in my mind. And he said to me in 2019, Naomi, you have to put your own oxygen mask on first. And if you think about when you get on a flight, what is the first thing that they say to you? In case of cabin pressure, losing cabin pressure, put your own oxygen mask on before children, before the elderly. Always put your own on first. And we're actually doing everybody a disservice by putting ourselves at the bottom of the list, because we can't, like you said, we end up giving the dregs, we end up giving the bottom of the teacup, and that's no good for anybody. But we've got this perception because we feel like we have to be everything to everybody, and a lot of that comes down to boundaries. We feel guilty saying no, whether it's in our business, whether it's to our family, whether it's to our friends. But it's just so important to look after our own health.
Yeah. And this is the thing, when we say look after our own health, that's mental and physical. It's
Totally.
a whole package, isn't it? And you can be the healthiest physically that you've ever been, but mentally you're rock bottom. So, and again, then that's not serving anybody. So it's about getting that balance and just spending that time. And I know, like you said, especially when we become parents, we have huge guilt on ever putting ourselves first. But actually, and especially in the entrepreneurial world, we have a lot of stress and a lot of pressures being business owners. So it's even more important, I think, for us to look after ourselves, because it all comes down to those labels, doesn't it? And how many plates we're spinning. So we're an entrepreneur, we have a business to run, potentially have a team that we need to look after and nurture. So the team are therefore before us. We're parents, so we have our children that come before us. We have a husband or wife that comes before us. We have all of these people, and as your success grows, the amount of people that you are putting before you also grows. And this is where, burnout is such a trigger word at the moment, isn't it? And I think it's actually overused and understood.
Yes, I agree.
But we are all on that path where we're running ourselves down and just constantly, we've got to go, we've got to go, we've got to work. It's not benefiting us in any way, is it? And it can be really actually limiting to the success that we achieve.
Yeah, and it limits our creativity. And I see that in myself. I make sure that I create time within my working week and my business week to, whether it's get out for a walk, even if it means, doubling up that time and actually responding to messages whilst I'm out. But I notice that having that time away helps me to be more creative, helps me to come back with, with a better sort of mindset. And you're so right about the sort of physical and mental health. And I and I can really sort of say this from, from my own personal experience. When I lost, nearly 5 stone in weight, I was my smallest that I'd probably been since I was a teenager. And of course, everybody was complimenting me on, God, you look amazing. Internally, I hadn't dealt with 30 years of depression, anxiety, panic attacks. So I'd worked on the external transformation. And then I sort of was like, I don't feel any different inside. I don't feel more confident. I don't feel all these different things. And that's when I started to work on the mental health and the emotional well-being. And it's why, I created my own smart formula, because I then realized that actually without the mental and the emotional well-being, the physical health is nothing, because it's so important. And as you said, as entrepreneurs, we are on a constant roller coaster. And I'm going to use that word resilience, which I think, again, sometimes gets used in the wrong way. Resilience isn't about, like powering through. Resilience is feeling that real inner strength of, I'm going to be okay, whatever happens, and not kind of like that real masculine energy of pushing, but actually leaning into that feminine energy of, I've got this, I can handle this. But actually sometimes, I said this to one of my clients yesterday, sometimes we've got to slow down to speed up.
Yeah.
But we just, again, we kind of like the next thing, what's coming next. And it's fueled by the world that we live in, and modern day living, and the dopamine hits, and the social media, and, all the new different, the new things that are constantly coming, and we've got to keep up with these algorithms, and we've got to do this. But sometimes we just have to say, what do I need amongst all of this?
Yeah, it's so true. I don't know where I saw this actually. I don't know whether it was it might have been Stephen Bartlett, but I saw something where you see a child in India, for instance, in one of the rural villages in India, a bowl of rice and some clean water is like the absolute pinnacle of their life.
Yeah.
Whereas to us in where we live, that's absolute rock bottom. So it's your perception of your surroundings, and for us, when we look around and we see so much on social media, all these glamorous lives, all these people saying how successful they are, and it gives us a feeling of inadequacy, I think. And then we're constantly pushing against that. Well, we want more all the time. And actually, if you just sit back and stop trying to keep up with the Joneses, just be like, what do I want? What am I happy with? What gives me contentment and gratitude? And I think that is such a beautiful place if you can get yourself to that spot. But it takes work, and it's actually there's no ending to that either, is there? Really,
no, natural. It's really funny you should say that. I'm always having this conversation with clients, and I think, again, if I kind of reconnect it to the weight loss journey, the reason so many people do not sustain their weight loss is because they're aiming for a goal, like whether it's to get to a certain dress size, whether it's to be in a certain thing for a certain wedding or an anniversary. And one thing I say is, it's a continual journey, just like entrepreneurship is. You never get there and that's it, it's done. It's the daily actions that sustain the success and that sort of keep you going. So yeah, I agree. It isn't just once done. It gets easier, and you get more, you get better. But actually it's a continual journey.
Yeah. It's about having that self-awareness, isn't it? And that understanding. Like you say, if we look at the health journey, you might say, I want to be able to run a 5K, or I want to, whatever. And that's the goal, that's the target. So you get to that point, and then if you haven't done the internal work, and this is what happened to me, and it's happened to thousands of other people, if you haven't done any internal work, the next day you're back on the couch and you're like, well, I've achieved that, great. And then you lose everything that you've worked on. So it's about building in daily habits, I suppose, which we talk about in business. Make sure you have those daily habits and the compounding effect. It's the same in weight loss and health, and just generally prioritizing yourself, isn't it?
Yeah, completely. And also what I think I want to say is that it's not complicated. A bit like business, we've overcomplicated things, or like you say, we start looking for the new shiny object. And actually the truth is, it's the unsexy stuff that works. It's the boring, mundane, dull. And I was saying to somebody the other day, You know what? I love boring now. Isn't it weird? I used to like crave the dopamine, crave the like, whether it was the nights out or the glass of wine or whatever. And now I just crave the like early night and the going out for the walk in nature. And I think it's really important, whether it's business or health, it's not complicated. A lot of industries have made it complicated because then that keeps you as a customer for that.
Exactly, they cash in. Yeah.
And also, if they don't educate you and they just make something overcomplicated with their own language or whatever it might be, then you're sort of almost stuck in there and you're scared to move anywhere else. But it is simple, and it is about sometimes the smallest daily habits that make the biggest impact over time. It's not the huge steps. It's always the little steps that are compounded.
Yeah, yeah, it is. So if we talk about, there's be listeners listening saying, this is all sounds great, but what really is the benefit of me doing this? How will it benefit the business? So what would you say are the sort of the key points where if you start prioritizing yourself and looking after your health, and as we've said, it's not necessarily about actually losing weight. For some people, it's purely just a health thing. If you're looking at that, how will I benefit? How will my life benefit? And how will my business benefit?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing, and I work with a lot of female entrepreneurs, but I also work with a lot of career women. And the biggest things that they have said that they gained, working with me and working with my smart formula is boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And not just boundaries with other people, because it's like I say, actually, you don't boundary set for others, you boundary set for yourself. It's like a form of self-respect, a form of gratitude to yourself, and it helps to enhance your own self-esteem. So boundary setting is a big one, because when you boundary set with yourself, that doesn't matter whether it's your health or your business. And it's hugely impacted my business. I used to allow clients to contact me at any time, and I'd respond at any time, and I'd
all been there.
yeah, and I'd literally go to the end of the earth to to do A, B, or C when I didn't need to do that. But again, that was some people pleasing tendencies that I had inherited and was conditioned with. Putting those into place in my own health and myself and in my business has had a massive impact. It does with all the women that I work with. And also, I'd say the other thing, confidence. I've got women that have worked with me and who have come to me first and said, my God, I've started this business, but I don't even feel confident to show up and do a Facebook Live. I'm worried that my family who are on my social media are going to judge me. And when we start to work on their health, their boundaries, their own mindset, all those different areas, they start to get to a point and they're like, well, I don't care about what anybody else thinks. I'm on a mission, or this is what I want to do. So, and that is nothing to do with the weight. It's nothing to do with the weight at all. It's purely to do with the belief system that we have and how we, like you said, perceive ourselves. And I know for me, my perception of myself was incredibly low. And it's funny because people that have known me for a long, long time say to me nowadays, but you were always confident. I wasn't. It was a mask. It was an act, and it was exhausting. I'd have panic attacks before having to present in my corporate career. I'd spend the whole weekend after a presentation literally on the sofa, just like drained and exhausted. And, if we want to use that word, kind of burnout, feeling complete exhaustion. That doesn't happen now, because actually what I show up with is authentic confidence. It's self-esteem that I've built. I'm not masking it. And that's exactly what I help other women to do, is let it come from a place of authenticity and a real place that they don't feel like they're having to fit in or having to pretend, and they can actually, just be themselves.
It's so powerful when you can get to that sweet spot. And so I put a post out this week actually on social. So I have obviously this podcast, and guests are constantly coming and pitching to me about being on here. And one woman recently pitched and said, well, I can talk about anything that your audience would benefit from. Now, I'm sure that, we can all talk about loads of different things, but you need to have the confidence to say, this is my thing. This is my mission. This is what I want to help the world with, and find the right podcast places, or just have the confidence to say, this one thing is what I want to talk about. It's what I want to be known about, known for. And it takes confidence to have that strength in conviction of this is the one thing. And so with you, obviously, I want to go back to, you said previously you had that people pleasing gene. I think so many of us have struggled with that at points in our life. But you've come into weight loss, which sounded like a massive transformation for you, where you were on a corporate journey. And then at some point, so that must have been difficult in itself. And then at some point, you've been like, no, hang on, my messaging is very different to the rest of the weight loss community in its entirety. So that must have been, it must have, been quite a big decision for you. And how did you handle that transition in yourself?
I love that you've picked up on that, because honestly, behind the scenes, I've been on a journey myself,
Yeah.
whilst also building and growing the business. And I think I felt such a misalignment a couple of years ago talking about the weight loss, because I had started to realize just how it wasn't about that. It was so much more behind. There was so many different layers to it. I actually realized as well that I was still holding on to shame and guilt and embarrassment in my own journey. And that really only came to light last year when I was doing some work on my messaging with one of my business mentors. And, she said, but that's not what you do, Naomi. I've seen the results that you get, and this is what you get with your clients. You're not a weight loss coach. You're not. And I'm like, well, I am, but I am, but I'm not. And that's when we landed on the unconventional weight loss coach, because people think it's all about the calories and about the workouts and about the 5 a.m. club and all these different things. And it's actually not. It's so much more about the stories we tell ourselves, the belief system we have, like you say, the people pleasing, all those different things that we've, and I quite often say it's a bit like the kind of, the bag that we have just carried along through life. And we get to, and I'm just about to turn 50 next week. And I think we get to this point in life, and actually that's where, my health transformation came about at 39. And I think quite often when we get to those pivotal moments, like,
Yes.
the new,
You know that I've been through it too. Yes.
we're kind of a bit like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
And so I think my my literal weight was like my 39th year into my 40th. And then what I feel like I've been doing over the last year, coming into my, 50th year, is actually really releasing all the metaphorical weight. And I feel like finally, I wouldn't have even probably been able to do this podcast a year ago, because I still had that self-doubt of, who am I? What's my real message? Who am I showing up as? I probably would have been that woman that messaged you and said, hey, I can talk about anything to your audience. When I saw your post this week, it really resonated, because I was like, I own what I do now, and it won't fit for everybody, and it won't appeal to everybody.
Thing about it, isn't it? That is the beauty in it.
Yes.
This is what I said, if we try and attract everybody, we end up connecting with nobody. We have to be really clear in our messaging. And the weight loss for you really is sort of the byproduct. It's something that happens accidentally with the rest of the work. And that's why I love, so you have a book, I think it's just been released.
Yes.
This week, I believe, and it's called Your Weight Is Not the Problem. And I absolutely love that, because it's so true, isn't it? The weight is the aftermath and the byproduct of us not loving ourselves enough and not having that faith, and not looking after ourselves. And that's just I suppose, the physical appearance of that self-neglect, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like the manifestation of it. And it took me, 27 years of yo-yo dieting and disordered eating. And I've only owned that in the last year. I was so ashamed and so embarrassed that for nearly 30 years, I had such a disordered relationship with food that I couldn't even talk about it as a weight loss coach. And then last year I was like, I need to own every piece of this, for me, and to honor what I've been through, but also to help other women. And so this book for me is just, I feel like, the guide that I needed 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15, 20 years ago. And you're right, and I always use that terminology that actually the weight is just a byproduct. The weight loss is a byproduct. It's all the other areas that, when you're looking after your health, when you've got your boundaries in place, when you understand how you work. I didn't even know that I could reprogram my neural pathways. I didn't even know what a neural pathway was. And it's only in learning those science-backed modalities and now teaching them that everything makes so much sense. And you can understand why, certain times of your life, or why relationships, or why career, or why business, you can start to understand things and lean into them. I always say, if something triggers you, don't walk away from the trigger. Don't hide from the trigger. That's when the problem happens.
Sit with it. Yeah. Work through it.
What is it that's triggering you? What is it that's uncomfortable? But I think, again, we often are in a world where we want to just soothe the problem, or put the trigger warning out there before we say something. And I know for, firsthand, that all those things keep fueling the feelings behind it, the failure, the embarrassment, the guilt, the shame, all those different things. So yeah, it's about showing up wholeheartedly as you are.
That's the thing, isn't it? It's not an easy journey. We all have a lot of baggage, like you say, that we've carried from our past. And it's about, I suppose, you need to be bold, and you need to face up to those elements. And it doesn't happen instantly. Like you said, you handled some of them, and then almost 10 years later, you're ready to handle the next ones. It's not an instant overnight fix for anything. And business isn't either. When we will all come up against challenges. So you said that only last year, probably, you wouldn't have been able to do the podcast, or you wouldn't have been as bold with your statement, this is who I am and this is what I do. It was the same for me. Years ago, I just wouldn't have dreamed of being on a podcast, let alone hosting a podcast, and the business, the work that I've done internally on myself, the lessons I've had to learn, the boundaries I've had to push, of the comfort zone, really grow through the tasks that you kind of have to do. Being comfortable with being uncomfortable has brought me to where I am. And, I've been in business a decade now, so it's not been an overnight thing, but I find it's really beautiful when you can actually sit back and appreciate the journey that you've been on and celebrate the journey. And like you're saying, a year ago, I wouldn't have been sitting here, and here I am today. And we need to have the gratitude for that, and the awareness of that journey. Yeah. So what do you think was the hardest point for you in your journey to date that you really, had to work hard to push through?
Walking out of my corporate career.
Yeah.
Was huge. I was 41 and, had a successful 21-year career. And for a girl who left school with virtually no qualifications, I lost my mum during my college term. And if I'm honest, I struggled with everything. I struggled with schoolwork. I struggled with college. So to have a 21-year career was like, wow. Anyway, I'd exceeded all my own expectations, but my mental health was at rock bottom and I was not in a good place. And, I'm independent. I didn't have a partner. I don't have a partner now. I had 2 mortgages on my own. I literally just had to jump and take the leap and do it. I say I had to. I didn't have to. I chose to. Mm-hmm. And I think for me, that was the biggest thing. But actually, it was what came afterwards that was the biggest thing. And what I hadn't realised was how caught up my identity was in this career woman. I'd not become a mum by choice, but I hadn't become a wife and I hadn't become a mum, so I wasn't a parent. So I felt all I was a career woman. And when I walked out of my corporate career at 41, I was a bit like, who is Naomi Holbrook? What does she like? Other than getting on the train at 5 o'clock in the morning and going to a corporate job and showing up in, the suit that she's meant to be wearing and, perform in this way in front of her team and everything. And that was a huge thing. And I know you and I were obviously somewhere last week together and we had this conversation with another lady about how there's almost like a grief process of grieving the corporate career that you've built up, everything you've poured into it. So I would wholeheartedly say that was probably the most difficult time, and even though I've been through a lot, losing my mum in my early years and everything else, I think that was one of my most lonely and difficult times. And I live here in Hove in East Sussex, and I must admit, I cried some tears on that beach for probably for months, on and off. Just what am I going to do next? And one thing I kept saying to myself was, I'm 41. What do I want to do for the next 20, 30 years that lights me up, that I don't feel every day like, oh, here we go again? And thankfully, I've created that, of just doing something that I love, that feels like it's always been inside of me, but I didn't know it was there, and I didn't know how to release it or how to kind of embrace it or whatever it might be. So I would absolutely say wholeheartedly that was the toughest time of my life. And for every reason, like financially, mentally, gosh, I had to really dig deep in some of those times.
So how did you make that transition? Had you already started the coaching business, or were you literally, did you not even have a plan when you left your corporate?
I know.
No, this is amazing. Like, it is amazing.
There was like a real mixed camp. There was like, I mean, I literally heard my colleagues whispering behind my back and saying, do you think she's having a midlife crisis? Do you think she's like going to move to Africa and like go and like set up like a charity or something? And then there were other people that were literally coming up to me, shaking my hand and going, I wish I had your courage. And I didn't feel like I had courage. I felt like I was almost backed into a corner. And it was like, for my own mental health and sanity, there's only two ways out of this situation. So there was no plan B. And I've only come across Tony Robbins since I left my corporate career, but I do love something that he says, and it really resonates with me now. And he's like, burn all your bridges. Because the problem is that when you have that safety net, and actually when I left my corporate career, they tried to get me to stay, and actually they offered me a year's sabbatical and all these different things. But I knew that having a year's sabbatical was still like a plan B, an option in the background. And I felt like I just needed this clear cut and this break. So I had no plan B. And I literally left my corporate career and was like, what am I going to do? I've got to keep roof above my head. So look, I got resourceful. I took in a lodger in my flat so that, some of the bills were being helped along. I started up a pet sitting business because I actually, when I left my corporate career, I didn't want to work with humans. I was like, do you know what? I don't want to speak to another human being. And I was like, I love pets. I love dogs. And if I'm honest, those pets and those dogs healed a part of me that I don't think another human being could have healed. So I pet sat for people when they were away on holiday. I even took a courier job 6 days a week, delivering parcels. And literally for 3 years, Claire, I worked solidly. I didn't have a day off. I just took a weekend off for my birthday every year. The rest of the time I worked. I was, delivering parcels. I then was studying to be recertified to get my nutrition and weight management qualification. So I was doing all these different things because I needed, it was a case of I need to do this to make it work. And it's one reason why nowadays, I do truly believe that if it's important enough, we'll find a way. And if it's not, we'll find an excuse.
100%. Yeah. Can't agree more. Yeah.
And funny enough, I've just had a bracelet sort of commissioned for my 50th birthday. And I was like, I want something really powerful put on it. And pretty much since 2019, or 2016, when I walked out of my career, my little mantra has been, I'll find a way. And I've had that put on there because I think we so often say, oh, I haven't got the time, I haven't got the money. And we say we haven't got the money, and then we go on the holidays and we buy the frivolous rubbish and we go out for all the drinks and all these different things. But it's just what's important to us. And what was important to me was changing my life, not just changing my job, but actually having the ability to completely change and transform every area of my life.
Yeah. It was the freedom of choice for yourself. and the ownership of your own life. And I think it's so often we get on the hamster wheel and you just stay on it. You don't see a way out of it at all. And so when I left my corporate career to set up my own business 10 years ago, I was the same. I got a job in a pub serving pints because I was like, I still need to be bringing them some income. The business is not going to be overnight bringing me in what I need. So I'll go and serve pints. So, luckily the business did grow very quickly and I actually didn't do it for very long, but I would have happily continued that for quite a while if that was what I needed to do, because it gave me the freedom to be there for my daughter and what I needed at that point in that chapter in my life. So I love that you would much have preferred to have that ownership of your life and be currying parcels and, pet sitting than getting your probably very good wage in a corporate career. But it's about having that self-belief, I suppose. And like you say, I will make it through. I will find a way.
Yeah. And that self-belief has been a learned behavior because if I'm honest, when I walked out of my corporate career, I was petrified. I didn't believe that I'd be here today, with the business that I've got, with the clients that I've got, doing what I love, having conversations like this. But each time I've either failed or, learned something from it, or each time I've actually succeeded, like I always say with my clients, belief it's a habit, it's a behavior. When we get a little bit of belief in one area, it fuels the next bit, it fuels the next bit and the next bit. And that's what's happened, is that belief has become, a learned habit and a learned behavior.
I think that's so powerful. And it's exactly the same, as what happened to me when we started. Didn't believe that it would really even be able to feel like 2 days of my time. I speak quite openly about this because I had never envisioned anything as big as what I built. It just was never in my line of sight at all. But gradually, I won the first client. That gave me the confidence to go out for the second client. And it comes over time. It's like a snowball compounding effect. And now if I face a challenge or something goes wrong, it does not impact me anywhere near how it did in the beginning, because I'm like, well, it's a lesson learned or whatever, move on to the next thing. Like it barely chips my armor at all anymore, whereas it would have been, fatal in the very beginning. So it's such a powerful
energy. Absolutely. And so many people, they see the transformation, they don't see all the little steps that you take, and the steps backwards. We've all had that happen where, things go backwards before it can kind of go forwards again. But absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. Naomi, thank you so much for joining me today. I've really loved our conversation. So big question, if people are interested in learning more about how you work or buying the book, where can they find you and find that information?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you so much, because it's been an absolute joy chatting with you. So www.theunconventionalweightlosscoach.com is my website. Links and everything are on there. But Instagram, I'm Naomi Holbrook Coach, and Facebook, just Naomi Holbrook. And the book is on Amazon.
Amazing. I'll put all the links in the show notes for everyone as well. But just thank you so much. I hope the listeners have gained loads from that, and it might have sparked a few questions and a few thoughts for them. So thank you for listening and joining us again this week, and I will speak to you all next week. Take care. I hope you have enjoyed today's episode, which was brought to you by Xero Accounting Software, a champion of small businesses and a proud sponsor of the Bold Blueprint podcast. If you're running a small business and you are dreaming big, then Xero is here to help make those dreams a reality. Xero is all about supporting entrepreneurs just like you, who are not just running businesses, but are also changing the game. So whether you're just starting out or you're scaling up, join a global community of small businesses who trust Xero to manage their finances efficiently.